The Amplify API Management platform makes it simple to configure a policy to manage identity and apply protection against identity threats. Let's look at how to create a policy that validates the client application's IP address, authenticates the user, and validates that the user is authorized for access. We will begin by configuring a policy using Policy Studio, a tool that simplifies building policies that manage API requests. Let's configure one of the threat protection filters to constrain access to a specific IP address. I'll enter my current IP address to allow testing with my web browser. Next, add the Set the Message filter to set the error response message displayed when accessed by an unauthorized user. Now authenticate the end user with the HTTP Basic Authentication filter, which uses the authorization header credentials to validate against a user profile stored in a directory server. Use the directory server of your choice. We will use the OpenLDAP directory server that is already configured in this API gateway. Now handle any authentication errors by setting a descriptive error response. For authorization, use the Retrieve Attributes from Directory Server filter to search the user's attributes. The attributes include the group information, and for this example, only members of the operations group are authorized. In the Advanced tab, we will use the default attribute user to hold the value returned from the directory server. Next, we use the Compare Attribute Values filter to validate if the user belongs to the operations group. Again, let's handle any authorization errors by displaying an appropriate error response. Now set the HTTP response code for all failures. Configure a confirmation response for successful authorization. And set the HTTP response code for the successful path. Configure this policy as an API called IDM. Then deploy and publish. Our configuration is now done. We have created a policy to validate the client application's IP address, authenticate the user, and confirm that the user is authorized for access. Now, let's test it. We will use test accounts from the directory server and test success with a user in the operations group. In this group, there are only two members, Dave and Sandeep. We'll use Dave to test for the successful path. Then, to test the failure path, we'll use Anna, who doesn't belong to the operations group. There are 4 possible conditions we will test for. Let's begin with a test of the error path policy. Invoke the API through the browser. Enter Anna's ID, but using an invalid password. As expected, an invalid credentials message will be returned. Let's try it again using the correct password for Anna. Authentication is successful, and as expected, authorization failed since Anna is not a member of the operations group. Now, to test the successful path, enter Dave's credentials. As expected, a successful authorization response is returned. The last part of our testing is the IP address authentication. Go back to the Policy Studio and modify the filter to deny access from the same IP address. Deploy, then test through the browser. As expected, access to the IDM API is getting denied because of the client's IP address that is calling it. To recap, predefined filters simplify many API management tasks, including, as we have seen in this example, the validation of user identities against a directory server. Predefined policy filters and custom policies enable you to address complex management requirements.